Africa is the most youthful continent in the world. The average African is about 19 years old. That contrasts very sharply with Europe, 41 years, the United States of America, 38 years, and then Asia, 30 years. Having a youthful population presents enormous opportunities. But that can and has created another problem for Africa, that of unemployment. Across the length and breadth of the continent, wherever you find people diligently killing and maiming, it is usually over economic opportunities and resources. So here we are, burdened with a difficult past already, and stuck with a youthful population, one that we rarely can feed nor find jobs for. And this has created the room for conflict, further compounding the problem. What do we do? It seems to me that our salvation lies at the heart of the key problems themselves. On one hand, we are stuck with energetic young people. On the other hand, we have a pile of social and developmental problems yearning for solutions. Now, if we could map one problem category onto the other, we just might succeed in solving both. If we can unleash the creative energies and capacities of these young people at the very social and developmental ills about which they are justifiably frustrated, we will, in the process, solve both problems and create several other opportunities. Now, it is increasingly becoming clear that some of our main problems are not really going to be solved by governments, for a number of reasons, including the harsh and brutal truth that sometimes, perhaps more often than not, sadly, a government is typically not the group with the brightest ideas or even talents in a given population. And so their ability to conceive of or identify and deploy truly transformative programs and policies is itself very limited. But something interesting has been happening in Africa. Across the length and breadth of the continent, a certain type of parallel leadership has been emerging. There are young people who are rising to fill the vacuum that has been created by incompetent governance. These people are creating solutions from providing ambulance services to products in education, to connecting farmers to buyers, to services in retail. These leaders are generally called social entrepreneurs. But what they engage in fundamentally is a form of activism, really, because they've stopped waiting on governments and have instead decided to find solutions to the very social problems we're all frustrated about and to weave commercial models of sustainability around these problems. Now, let me use an example to illustrate my point. These days, just about anything at all can be counterfeited, from clothes to cologne to wine to just about everything. But of all the products and commodities that are counterfeited across markets and across the globe, it is the counterfeiting of medicines in particular that has aroused acute concern and worry. Because I believe we can all agree that if you buy a fake pair of your favorite shirt or sneakers, the stakes are much less than, say, a mother who is buying cough syrup for her baby, or a young lady buying a contraceptive, or a young man buying an anti-malarial, and in each instance, each of them receiving an untested, unapproved, uncertified concoction that will just not bring any healing or relief, but can actually expose them to suffering and death. The trade in counterfeiting goods globally is a huge problem. It's been estimated to hit $2 trillion United States dollars by 2020. That is the entire size of the economy of African GDP. That is also just about how much we need to end global hunger for the next 66 years. But the statistics can be a bit impersonal. Before I deliberate on that, on your screen is an example of a fake medicine versus a genuine medicine. As you can see, the counterfeiters are able to mimic the branding of the original one so effectively that not even trained professionals can tell. And just about every single buyer in the market is significantly exposed. But the statistics can be impersonal, right? These are numbers and figures. But in reality, they point to just one thing and one thing only: the suffering and death of our family members, our friends, our loved ones, our countrymen and countrywomen. This is a Nigerian doctor who reported on BBC that while conducting a surgery, the patient woke up 15 minutes after they had opened him up because the medicines they had used had failed. And this is the picture of a popular gospel musician in Nigeria who died in 2017, and various reports in the media indicated that he had taken counterfeited anti-malarial drugs. Now, at the height of the debate, the global debate about counterfeiting in particular, in general, and what to do about it, several solutions were offered, typically from advanced Western centers, such as the RFID technology and the use of holograms. But most of these solutions were not really compatible with deployments at scale, especially in developing economies and countries where the need for these solutions were severest, for a number of reasons. The first one was that they required significant levels of infrastructure. And then to use these technologies themselves required significant understanding of technology in general, and those technologies in particular. The third, which was most significant for a lot of countries in Africa and the third world, was cost. They were simply not compatible with the spending budgets of most health ministries. The way forward seemed pretty unclear. Then in 2007, a Ghanaian startup called M-Pedigree made a bold proposal to the world. We proposed that we can curb the menace of counterfeit medicines by serializing every single pack of medicine to be sold. At the point of purchase or usage then, all the patient or consumer has to do is to authenticate the particular pack of medicine they have bought by simply sending a code from the product to a short code at no cost to the consumer. Now, this solution was revolutionary for a number of reasons. First of all the solutions prior had focused on a top-bottom approach, which was typically governments want to tighten regulatory control or impose sanctions. But M-Pedigree's solution was a bit of a bottom-upwards instead. We wanted to place consumers and patients at the center of the solution and give them the power to become the vanguards against counterfeit medications. A consumer can then be the agent who sifts out a genuine medicine from a fake one. Now, the staggering thing about this solution when we deployed was that we were able to achieve two significant things. First of all, it was already compatible with the tech exposure of most Africans, for instance, because a lot of us, in most places in Africa, are used to the process of buying airtime through scratch cards. And then, secondly, after 3 years of deploying, the price of the medicines in Nigeria, where we've had our biggest operation, did not rise. This was clear proof to the fact that industry was able to absorb the cost and not pass it on to consumers who were already suffering from limited incomes. Now, moving on from prescription drugs, we designed a solution called cold chain, which is essentially a tool that preserves the potency of vaccines and ensures that the vaccines are not exposed to temperatures that will be destructive to their contents. And those vaccines get to the children and the infants who need them in their state of high efficacy. Given the success we've had in pharmaceuticals overall, we have pivoted over the years to a dozen other industries. In West Africa and Ghana, we are working with the government and the textile sector to revive it, given the collapse it has faced, arising out of the stiff competition the market has faced from the influx of cheap versions of African designs and African motifs from places like China. In East Africa, we are working with governments to serialize packs of seeds so that farmers can authenticate before they use them, nipping in the bud what might as well have turned out to be a catastrophic farming situation. It is important to mention that this is an area in which African innovators and African designers and builders are showing clear global leadership. The European Union, for instance, required all of its member states to serialize and enable end-user authentication of medicines by 2019. This was something that, working with the Nigerian government and the Nigerian regulators and other stakeholders in that ecosystem, Nigeria was able to achieve as far back as 2016 for all anti-malarials sold in that country. If you ask me, I would argue that this solution could have only come from an African perspective. Unique hardships can create unique solutions. If we reflect purposefully, we would realize that our difficulties have also sharpened our wits and caused us to approach problem solving from a peculiar standpoint. Now, typically, you would realize that when you are in a difficult situation, how you evaluate situations are a bit different than when you are, say, in a much more comfortable situation. For us, that is how we find innovation in Africa. That if we adopt an entrepreneurial, innovative approach to societal building, we could solve not just local problems, but we could build products and solutions that would assume global and international importance. Out of the bellies that form the continent itself, we could spew forth solutions like the world has never seen before. All is not doom and gloom on the continent. The days where Afro-pessimism was all that characterized public opinion about the continent are long gone. The GDP of the African economy between 2005 and 2015 grew by a staggering 50%. This was in sharp contrast to the global average of 23%. As the African economy has grown, we've seen that poverty has reduced and the middle class has grown. The continent will have over 700 million people using cell phones by 2020. And 60% of the world's usable arable lands are still right here in Africa. As the population continues to grow and continues to get young, we'll continue to have opportunities to build solutions in medicine, in music, in technology, and in all kinds of services, creating several opportunities for the masses of our people. We are also in a very unique position to learn from past mistakes made by other continents and other countries, and leapfrog some of the developmental errors made by Europe, and create new systems and reimagine new ways of producing, of manufacturing, and of setting up financial services. Now, if that is not enough to convict our belief in this seemingly optimistic version of Africa that I'm trying to paint, then perhaps we might want to look at history. We tend to forget, particularly and sadly Africans, more often than not, that this is the continent that gave the world the plow. The earliest forms of irrigation farming and several other methods of farming were discovered right here on the continent. Major strides in medicine, in metallurgy, in religion, in philosophy and law were developed in Africa before being exported to the rest of the world. From Egypt or Kemet, for those of us that are a bit more historically sensitive, to the empires of Ghana and the city of Benin, to the Ethiopians in the east, to the men and the women who founded the mighty nations in the southern part of Africa, Africa has flourished in years past. This place was once an astonishing ground for creativity and human ingenuity. And we can do that again. We can recreate, we can rebuild, and we can use our current disadvantage to our advantage. We can take inspiration from our rich heritage and take advantage of the current trend of optimism on the continent and build solutions and fix our continent. All of us. My view tends to be that whatever bothers you most, whatever frustrates you most, whatever drives you mad about the continent and the current state of its development should be the thing that you commit to solving within your lifetime. And perhaps it is fitting that a number of us here work in early childhood development. Because I also believe that we must engage in some of these constructive discussions with our young ones and our children at a very early age. Help them figure out what stirs them up the most about the continent and guide them to evolve new ways and methods and build solutions. Help them figure out better ways humanity could live, humanity could love, humanity could work. Now, some of the astonishing figures that we've seen in human history have been Africans. One of the consistent contenders for the title of the world's richest man is a man who once ruled over what was known as the Mali Empire, Mansa Musa. There's an American politician who once noted that very few men will have the greatness to bend history itself. But the interesting thing is that each of us, working in our own ways to change small portions of events, could, over time, culminate in huge acts of courage that could change or shape human history. There will continue to be challenges. But the first president of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, has some words of encouragement for us. That the task ahead is great indeed, and heavy is the responsibility. And yet it is a glorious and noble challenge. A challenge which calls for the courage to dream, the courage to do, the courage to dare, the courage to work, the courage to achieve the fullest and greatness, the fullest greatness of man. Dare we ask for more in life? My answer would be no. If Africa is springing anew, and if we work systematically to sustain the current trend of optimism, achieving as many economic miracles as we can, and as we have been able to do over the last few decades, we just might hasten the coming of Africa's great day of glory. Thank you.